I never imagined that a single touch of color on lips could change everything. The morning sun had not yet pierced through the thin curtains when I heard the familiar hum of the town waking outside. My heart, heavy as wet clay, carried the weight of the unknown. I remember thinking, today feels different. There was a tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks, and I could not shake it. Pastor Sampson was unlike any pastor I had ever known. He walked into Fire of Grace Ministries every Sunday, not in the solemn robes I had grown up seeing, but in gowns that shimmered like water under sunlight. The first time I saw him wear cherry red lip gloss, I froze. Long wavy black hair, soft brown highlights glinting under the sanctuary lights, framed a face I had only known behind stern sermons and booming prayers. The gowns flowed and flared, perfectly tailored, the sleeves wide, the waist cinched, moving as if they had a life of their own. Red heels clicked against the floor with a rhythm that seemed to command the room, while painted nails and sparkling earrings caught every eye. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, the choir paused mid-note, and the elders whispered to each other, their faces tight with disbelief. I had been attending Fire of Grace for years, drawn first by the fire in his sermons, by the way he called out sin like thunder rolling over the hills, and by the memory of his father, Pastor Elijah, whose devotion had built the church from nothing. But this was something else. The church grew not from sermons anymore, but from curiosity. People called him the Divine Diva. Social media dubbed him Pastor Barbie. Every Sunday, new faces filled the pews, watching the mystery unfold. I had known him before all this change. Before gowns, before wigs, before the lip gloss that shone like a red morning sun. I remembered him as a boy, devout and fiery. The son of Pastor Elijah and Mama Ruth. He carried the weight of their legacy in his small frame. Mama Ruth was nothing like a pastor's wife. Bold, unapologetic, her skirts tight, makeup heavy, her presence scandalous to the townspeople. But his father always said, "She is my cross, and a man does not throw away his cross." I never understood it then, not fully. But Samson, even as a child, seemed to sense the currents beneath the surface, following his father everywhere, learning, observing, absorbing. When Pastor Elijah died, the town shook with grief. We lined the streets as Samson stood beside the coffin, silent and still as a tree in a torrential downpour. His heart beat behind his chest like a drum in the dark, but his face betrayed nothing. And yet, the elders saw the fire still alive in him. "You will lead us now, Samson," they said. "Your father's fire is inside you." And he stepped forward, carrying the Bible in both hands, speaking with a voice that rose and fell like mighty waves, bringing warmth and power to every soul who listened. But even with his zeal, something had begun to falter. The church emptied slowly, pew by pew, as if the spirit of the place had quietly turned away. He prayed, fasted, wept alone on the altar, but the emptiness remained. And then Mama Ruth, with her voice like oil over glass, summoned him one evening. Her gaze held a secret, one Samson could not ignore. "You must begin to dress like a woman," she whispered. The words struck him like fire, searing and impossible. "No, I am a man," he replied, heart racing, but she did not waver. "Then let your father's church die," she said softly, dangerously. "Let the benches stay empty. Let all his work turn to sand." I watched him that night, kneeling on the cool tile floor, tears soaking into the cracks, whispering into the shadows, "Father, what cross is this?" And in the dim light of dawn, I saw him rise, red-eyed but resolute, approaching her room again. "I am ready," he said softly. And with that, the journey began. The collars, gowns, heels, wigs, and lip gloss, transforming the pastor who once carried only fire into a vision the town could not ignore. Every Sunday after that, I watched as the church doors opened to a new world. Gowns that flowed like rivers, colors bright and impossible, heels that clacked like tiny towers, hair cascading like waterfalls. And the people, they stayed, as if bound to the mystery, as if the presence of God shimmered not only in the sermons, but in every glossy lip, in every flared sleeve, in every bold step across the sanctuary floor. The first Sunday after he said those words, the church felt strange, electric, as if the air itself had shifted. I sat in my usual pew, my hands clasped tightly, and watched him enter. The gown was a deep emerald, flowing, the sleeves billowing like sails in a storm. Every movement was deliberate, graceful, precise. The wig framed his face perfectly, soft curls brushing the shoulders, while the lip gloss shone like a jewel catching the morning sun. The heels, impossibly tall, clicked in a rhythm that seemed to echo inside my chest. Whispers rippled across the room, but no one left. Not even the elders, whose stern eyes tried to mask confusion and disbelief. I caught a glimpse of Elder Dyke's lips moving silently, as if he were speaking to himself, struggling to understand. But Samson, no, the new presence in front of us, held their attention in a way I had never seen before. There was fire still in him, yes, but now it was tempered, reshaped, a fire that demanded you look, that refused to be ignored. I could feel the tension under my skin as he began to speak. The words were the same, filled with passion, conviction, and a call to righteousness, but they carried something new, an invitation to wonder, to question, to see God beyond the familiar. I watched as the people leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide, hands gripping pews. The energy was palpable, a mix of awe, shock, and curiosity. After the sermon, the congregation spilled into the courtyard. Conversations were murmurs of astonishment and intrigue. I saw mothers gripping their children's hands, whispering cautions, while teenagers nudged each other, their faces alight with excitement. People were no longer attending merely for guidance. They were attending for the story, the presence, the mystery that Samson had become. I couldn't deny it. There was something magnetic about him now. Not just his appearance, not just the daring of the gowns and heels, but the courage that came from embracing the unknown, from walking into the storm of judgment with a calm, unshakable faith. I found myself drawn to him, compelled by the paradox of the man I had known and the vision I now witnessed. The days that followed were filled with murmurs in the market and along the dusty streets. Pastor Samson, people whispered, he has changed. But is it still the fire of God? The question hung in the air like smoke, impossible to answer. The elders struggled, some attending services reluctantly, others avoiding them altogether. And yet, the pews continued to fill, more every week, drawn not only by faith but by the spectacle, the enigma of what they could not define. At home, I wrestled with my own thoughts. I had grown up watching Samson, learning from his father, understanding the weight of ministry, the power of faith. But this challenged everything I thought I knew. I thought I understood righteousness, devotion, and calling. But now, it was layered, complex, a mixture of courage and vulnerability, rebellion and obedience. I could not help but feel the pulse of his struggle within myself, a tension that mirrored the tension in the congregation. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the orange glow bled across the dusty rooftops, I found myself lingering in the empty church. The doors creaked as I pushed them open, and the familiar smell of old wood and wax filled my lungs. He was there, kneeling at the altar, the gown now a soft violet, sparkling faintly under the last light of day. He looked up as I approached, eyes deep, unreadable, yet full of a quiet plea. "Do you think they will ever understand?" I asked, my voice trembling, a whisper against the vast silence. He paused, fingers resting lightly on the Bible, then smiled softly. "Some will," he said. "Some never will. But God understands." I wanted to argue, to say that people should understand, that this was too much, too sudden. But the truth hung in the air like a delicate cord, and I could not dispute it. He was not asking for approval. He was asking for acceptance, from himself first, from the world second. As weeks passed, I watched the transformation deepen, not just in attire, but in presence. The gowns became more intricate, each detail deliberate. The lip gloss, the heels, the wigs, they were not distractions, not performances. They were symbols of courage, markers of a path chosen despite fear, judgment, and misunderstanding. People began to see not just the spectacle, but the soul beneath it. And yet, shadows remained. The elders whispered behind closed doors, murmuring prayers that felt desperate. A few walked away, shaking their heads, unwilling to reconcile tradition with this new vision. But more stayed. The curious, the seeking, the hopeful. They filled the pews, leaning in, eyes wide, as if watching a miracle unfold. I realized, standing in the back, hands clasped tightly around the pew, that this was bigger than fear, bigger than scandal, bigger than any expectation. This was a story about courage, about faith, about the fire of a man willing to embrace a truth too complex for most hearts to hold. And as I watched him speak, sway, smile, and move, I understood that nothing would ever be the same. Not for him, not for the church, not for me. The following Sunday, the air was thick with anticipation. I arrived early, taking my usual seat near the back, heart pounding. The pews were already filling faster than I had seen in months, a mix of regulars and new faces, each curious, each daring to witness what no one had dared before. There was a quiet murmur, a low hum of speculation that seemed to vibrate against the wooden floorboards. Then, there he was. The gown was a rich sapphire, the fabric flowing and glinting under the lights like water reflecting a stormy sky. Sleeves extended gracefully, swaying with every step, and the wig cascaded over broad shoulders in perfect waves. The heels clicked with authority, each sound a declaration, each movement a poem. Cherry-red gloss-painted lips that had once been stern and commanding, now soft, daring, defiant. The congregation gasped as one body, a mixture of shock, fascination, and awe. I watched as he moved down the aisle, carrying the Bible with the same reverence I had seen in his father, yet now there was something else, a courage that radiated from every curve of his body, every swing of the gown, every deliberate glance at the congregation. I felt my own chest tighten. Something about his transformation was hypnotic, magnetic, unsettling. He was the same man I had grown up with, yet entirely new, reshaped in ways that defied comprehension. He began to speak, and his voice carried through the church like a wave. Passion, conviction, and authority intertwined with an elegance that left the audience riveted. His words, at first, were the familiar echoes of sermons I had heard countless times. But now, there was vulnerability, there was raw honesty, a willingness to be seen as both human and divine instrument. I saw mothers glance at their children, children glance back, all caught in the spell of a man who refused to be anything but fully himself. After the sermon, I lingered near the altar, watching as the congregation filed out. Conversations erupted, whispers, exclamations, debates. Some were scandalized, some inspired, many confused. I overheard one woman murmur, "He's like fire and silk at once. How can anyone be both?" Another elder, his face tight, whispered prayers under his breath, muttering disapproval, his hands shaking slightly. And yet, they returned next week, compelled by something they couldn't name. At home that evening, I sat alone, my thoughts racing. I thought of his journey, the long, grueling nights of prayer, the tears shed on the altar, the struggle to reconcile his faith, his duty, and the unexpected guidance of his mother. Mama Amina had always been a figure of quiet power in our town, her wisdom wrapped in mystery, her voice soft yet unyielding. Her words haunted him, and, in some strange way, all of us. Some crosses are not meant to be discarded. The next week, I arrived early again, curiosity pulling me forward like a tide. He was already there, arranging candles along the altar. The gown shimmered faintly in the early sunlight, a soft lavender adorned with subtle rhinestones. The wig flowed like ink spilled in water, the heels making a steady, deliberate rhythm against the floor. I noticed the details, nails painted a deep crimson, earrings glinting under the light, the careful layering of fabrics that spoke of intention, patience, and courage. I took a deep breath as he began to preach. The sermon was about faith, resilience, and embracing God's plan even when it defied societal norms. But now, he spoke about transformation, not just his own, but ours. About stepping into the fullness of ourselves, embracing the unexpected, the unconventional, and the unknown. His words stirred something deep inside me, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Later, I lingered outside the church, watching as the crowd dispersed. Conversations buzzed with curiosity and admiration. People were beginning to see beyond the gowns and wigs, beginning to sense the fire still burning inside, the unwavering commitment to God and purpose. And yet, there was tension, a quiet undercurrent of resistance that refused to dissolve. Some were scared, some confused, some inspired beyond words. That night, I found myself walking the empty streets alone, pondering the changes unfolding before my eyes. I remembered the nights he had spent on the cold church floor, his body trembling with exhaustion, his heart heavy with doubt. And I thought of Mama Amina, her eyes sharp, her words sharp, guiding him in ways that defied explanation. This is the path, I whispered to myself, even if none of us can understand it yet. By the next service, the church had grown more crowded than ever. People came from surrounding towns, drawn not just by curiosity, but by the legend of the divine diva, the pastor who wore gowns and heels but spoke with a fire that could not be dimmed. I took my seat in silence, heart racing, watching as he stepped into the light. His presence commanded attention effortlessly, his every movement deliberate, each gesture a blend of grace, power, and defiance. He began to preach, and I felt it again. The magnetism, the intensity, the raw honesty. This was no longer just a man in a gown. This was a symbol, a testament to courage, transformation, and the complexity of faith. And as I listened, I realized that this story was not about scandal or shock or fashion. It was about devotion, resilience, and the unflinching pursuit of truth, even when it required stepping into the unknown. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a golden glow over the wooden pews. I arrived early, as usual, heart thrumming in my chest. Today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that something was about to shift in ways no one could predict. The murmurs had started even before the doors opened. People spoke in hushed tones, casting glances at the altar, curious, apprehensive, and strangely reverent. Then he entered. The gown was a rich emerald green, the fabric shimmering like a forest after a rainstorm. The sleeves flared wide, brushing the floor, the wig flowed in dark waves over broad shoulders, and the heels clicked against the floor with the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. His painted nails caught the sunlight, and the subtle glow of lip gloss made his smile almost otherworldly. I watched, captivated, as the familiar man I had known all my life transformed before my eyes. The congregation gasped, whispered, and stared, some in disbelief, some in awe. He raised the Bible, holding it firmly with both hands. His voice, clear and steady, filled the sanctuary, yet there was softness in it now, a vulnerability that had been absent before. The sermon began, and I felt the power of his words resonate deep within me. He spoke of faith that defies expectations, of courage in the face of judgment, of embracing the paths God sets before us even when they seem unconventional or frightening. Every word struck like a drumbeat against the walls of my heart, shaking loose doubts I hadn't realized I carried. The congregation leaned in, rapt. The elders, usually rigid and cautious, exchanged glances, their expressions softening despite themselves. Parents held their children close, and the children watched wide-eyed, sensing the extraordinary unfolding before them. I noticed a young man near the front, his face alight with curiosity, unable to look away, as if witnessing something sacred and forbidden at once. After the sermon, the crowd lingered, reluctant to leave. Conversations erupted in murmurs, debates, and awestruck whispers. People speculated about the gowns, the heels, the lip gloss, yet beneath it all, they sensed the truth. This was more than performance. It was devotion, transformation, and courage made visible. I stayed behind, walking quietly among the pews, feeling the energy of a congregation caught between shock and inspiration. At home that evening, I could not sleep. The images of the day kept replaying in my mind, the graceful movements, the unwavering gaze, the extraordinary combination of fire and elegance. I thought of the long nights of prayer he had endured, the tears shed in silence, the confusion and despair that had led him here. I thought of Mama Amina, the quiet force guiding him, her wisdom shaping his destiny in ways the world would never fully understand. By midweek, news of his transformation had spread beyond our town. Social media buzzed with debates, admiration, and incredulity. Pastor Barbie and Divine Diva trended across platforms, but those who knew him understood there was far more beneath the surface. It was not about spectacle or shock. It was about authenticity, courage, and the relentless pursuit of faith in its most complete form. Sunday came again, and the church was packed. People from neighboring towns, drawn by curiosity and reverence alike, filled every seat. He appeared in a gown of deep crimson, the sleeves like flowing rivers of silk. The wig shimmered under the lights, and the heels clicked with authority and grace. He carried the Bible with reverence and love, and his eyes met the congregation with a confidence that came from trials endured, fears faced, and a path fully embraced. The sermon was extraordinary. He spoke of grace that transcends judgment, of love that refuses to be bound by convention, of faith that transforms and liberates. Every word resonated with raw honesty, shaking walls, hearts, and minds alike. I watched, tears streaming down my face, as the congregation absorbed the power and vulnerability intertwined in every gesture, every sentence, every glance. After the service, people approached him with gratitude, awe, and questions. Some came to apologize for judgment, some to offer support, some simply to witness and understand. And I understood finally what Mama Amina had always known. This was his true path, the path of courage, authenticity, and divine purpose. The gowns, the wigs, the lip gloss, they were not distractions, but instruments of revelation, showing the congregation that faith, courage, and identity can coexist beautifully, powerfully, and unapologetically. As I walked home that evening, the streets quiet and golden with sunset, I felt a profound sense of hope. He had not only survived the trials of doubt and expectation, but had emerged stronger, luminous, and undeniable in his purpose. And in that, I realized the deepest truth of all. God's plan often comes in forms we cannot anticipate, through methods we do not understand, yet always with love, wisdom, and relentless courage at its heart. The church doors remained open, the pews filled with faces new and familiar. The world outside may have judged, misunderstood, or whispered, but inside, there was only truth, devotion, and fire. A fire that would never be extinguished, a fire carried by a pastor who had embraced his path, his identity, and the divine calling in all its unexpected glory.